blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 yada, 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 yada. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Probably not. Words are important. That's what Don Miguel Ruiz was talking about. Words are important. Not because they're the most important thing in the world, but because we have the ability to take an infinite range of possibilities that occur to us and focus it down into what it is that we want to intend, that we want to say, that we want to communicate. We get to turn that into words. Words are a focusing tool that lets us take, yeah, you know, like whatever, and focus it down into specificity. And we can do that with great clarity, or as Don Miguel Ruiz says, impeccability. Or we can be vague. You know what I mean? That phrase, by the way, is quite a cop-out. You know what I mean. That means I'm not going to take responsibility for being clear about what it is that I'm trying to say. I'm going to make you do all the work. You know what I mean. The number of times I've been in conversations where somebody will say something along the lines of, and this is just an example type. Sharon and Sally and I were talking, and she said that she should get a different job because her boss was a jerk. And I say, who are you talking about? Is it Sally, or is it Judy, or is it you? I can't tell from the way that you told the story. Now, sometimes from the clues around it, I can put the pieces together and figure out which of those people had what was going on. And if I get it right, then the conversation can move forward because I do know what they meant. And if not, what we have is a classic Blake Edwards comedy movie where you take one simple misunderstanding and the entire rest of the movie is based on the fact that everybody's making an assumption based on that. And all the rest of it turns into a snowball. You know what I mean. Except maybe you don't know what I mean. When we're communicating, the job of communication isn't with what I'm saying. When you and I are communicating, my job is to get the idea across to you. I not only have to say it, I need to make sure that it lands. If I can say something very specific and have you go, got it, I understand, then you know what I mean. And if I'm in one of those situations, and I have had this happen before as well, where the people who are having the communication are so fine-tuned that somebody can say blah, 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 and the other person will get it, then it landed, and it worked. We had that experience just this morning with the word water. Now, out of context, you have no idea what I mean. Am I talking about going to the beach? Am I talking about a boating activity? Am I talking about a bottle of Evian? No, actually what happened, before the program began, Reverend Dave and Ginger were talking about the music that we're going to do during the meditation. And whether Ginger was going to play the piano or we're going to play a track. And so Ginger just said, we'll play a track. And Dave said, water. And they continued talking, and I told Ginger it was just taken care of because we have a meditation track called Water by P.C. Davidoff, and Elizabeth knows that. And Dave happened to make eye contact with Elizabeth because she was paying attention to that part of the conversation. So the word water in that case meant, when we get to the meditation, play the Water track by P.C. Davidoff as background. I know what you mean. We don't always have to use all of the words in our arsenal. What we need to do is make sure that we're getting the message across. When Don Miguel Ruiz is talking about being impeccable with your word, he's not saying use lots of them. He's not saying use a whole dictionary full. He's saying make sure that what you want somebody to understand and the words that you're using to convey your message are cohesive and coherent. and that you're going to be able to support it that way. And that way you can say water, and the message gets through. Or you can be eloquent and pontificate, and it comes across as blah, 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 blah. This happens in every part of our life. Our ability to communicate is not our ability to talk or to speak words or to say words. Our ability to communicate is to resonate, to find a way to transplant that idea, that notion, that thought from my mind into your mind. That's where the communication happens. It can go mind to mind. It can go heart to heart. I'll try another one. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. And it's possible that the emotion of that came through, and it makes much more difference than what words I use to convey it. There are a lot of different ways that we can communicate with each other. There's a lot of different ways that what I need to hear and what you need to say might be different. I was doing some spiritual counseling with a couple of friends of mine, who I will call Pat and Lee, just because that's gender agnostic and you really takes the personality out of it completely. So Pat is very bubbly and ebullient and really enthusiastic and energetic. And Lee is what the Ayurvedics call a pitta dosha, very fiery. A lot of challenges and frustrations. And Lee sometimes gets frustrated and bogged down and wants to yell and scream. And that doesn't work for Pat, because Pat is just like, let's take some input and make something out of it. And the challenge that they run into is that when Lee starts yelling and screaming, Pat's taking it personally and making the energy drop down. So the only advice that I was able to give was to Lee is that Lee's need to yell and scream and Pat's need to be yelled at and screamed at, we're not the same thing. You need to yell and scream, I understand. Normally in our society what we say is, Lee, don't yell and scream. It makes people upset. Which is like turning the lock down on the pressure cooker. Okay, it's going to work for a little while, but eventually there's going to be an explosion rather than a gush of steam. The idea instead is to be able to take the steam and let the steam off where it's not going to break anything, or it's not going to bother anybody. The steam's going to come out eventually anyway. It can be as simple as being in the middle of a conversation, saying, excuse me for a moment. Where were we? It's funny when I do that as a demonstration, but it works. It works. My need to be yelled at and somebody else's need to yell and scream are not the same thing. Well then, why do we yell and scream at people? Because every once in a while it's important. Every once in a while it's true, somebody needs to be yelled at. Sorry, that's just, and the reason that somebody needs to be yelled at is, let me translate this. I have observed this situation before. I have stated my needs. I have made a request to have your behavior changed in the past, and you haven't paid attention to that. You haven't put due diligence into understanding where I'm coming from and acknowledging that this is important to me. So now I'm going to yell about it. It's like, oh, this is important to him. It's just a signal system. I don't need to dump all of my energy into somebody. The only time that that's going to be good is, let me make sure that you understand this is really important. This is relevant and important to me. And the rest of the yelling and screaming, if I energetically I need to get it out, I was taught to, one of my counselors said, go hit a pillow. Like, really? Yeah, because if I'm feeling really angry, I can throw stuff. I've done it before, especially in my youth. I threw stuff around, I broke things. And when I realized that wasn't working for me, and I realized that I could take that same energy and use it to smack the pillow, or take it out on cushions and stuff like that, there was a disconnect between me showing somebody how angry I was and me letting my anger out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the idea is, what do you mean? Because if I know what I mean, and I can be clear about what it is that I want to communicate to you, just for myself, to understand what it is that I want you to understand. Do I want you to feel demeaned and humiliated because I'm yelling at you? Or do I want your behavior to change because there's something that's been going on that I want to change so that we can continue to have a loving and supportive relationship? Those are two different things. If I'm looking for somebody who I can yell and scream at and demean because it'll make me feel better, then it's not going to work. We run through people, and there are people who run through relationship after relationship after relationship because they think that being able to do that to somebody else is going to make them feel better. And does it? No. It might for a little while, which is the illusion part of it. But it doesn't work. If you want to see communication go badly, watch text messages. Because what tends to happen a lot in text messages is somebody will say something, and then the other person will ask two questions. And then the first person will answer one of the questions but not specify which of the two questions they're answering. Have you seen this happen? Mm-hmm. I did this yesterday. I texted a friend of mine and I said, there's a memorial service that we're going to be scheduling. I'd like to talk to you about it. When are you available? Okay, are you available tomorrow to talk about it? And she texted back, and she said, when's the memorial service? Or maybe it wasn't when's the memorial service, when would be good? Or what's the date, I think is what she said. It's like, well, the date is today or tomorrow. Because I'm answering the question that I actually asked, rather than the one that you jumped to. This communication goes badly in text messaging, even without autocorrect and Siri. When you bring autocorrect and Siri into the equation, it's amazing that we can actually get anything accomplished. You know what I mean? However, there's a time when we can take that ambiguity of language, that blah, 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 and put it to use for ourselves. And it dovetails in with that situation that Lee and Pat were in. Because what we're going to do is we're going to break into pairs, and we're going to do an experiential exercise now. In fact, I'd like you to go ahead and do that now. Pair up with somebody who you you didn't show up with and you're not in family with. It only matters for certain ones of us, but for those, that's going to be some combination. So everybody, get somebody who you're going to do this activity with. Go ahead now, sit next to them. We're going to move around a little bit. This is completely interactive. You two are going to be together. Can somebody come up here and work with Jay? Come up and work with Jean, please. So, there's good news and bad news in this activity. The bad news is you are going to be talking about your most critical, personal, vulnerable issue. The good news is the only words you're going to use are blah, blah, blah. Okay? You know what I mean. So, amongst yourselves, decide who's going to go first. One of you decide who's going to be first. You're both going to get a turn. Okay? The person who's going first, come out in your mind with what that issue is. Whatever it is that's on your mind, whatever it is that's bothering you, that's troubling you, that you want to have turn into something different. And you get to be as whiny, as complainy, as negative as you want to be, but don't use the words. Just use blah, blah, blah. Okay? And explain the problem, and explain all of those people who are doing it to you, and all the difficulties and challenges, and how you're being victimized, and all the rest of it. Just go as negative as you want in blah, 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 blah.
We're going to be here for days.
No, we're going to be here for about, going to be here for about 2 minutes. Okay? So you're just going to let that go. And the second person, what you're going to do is you are simply going to hold that person, hold your partner in love. Understand that they are going through a challenging experience, but the truth is they are a bright light of love. You are simply giving them the space to communicate. They're not talking about you. Even if they are talking about you, they're not talking about you. All they're doing is they're giving you blah, blah, blah. Does anybody have any questions that absolutely positively must be answered before we start?
No.
Okay, cool. So go ahead and first person, top of your lungs if you want to. I will ring the chime when we get to the end of 2 minutes. Go.
Blah, blah, sack of coffee.
Okay, person number 1, bring your blah, blahs to a close.
Actually, you can. I just did it.
So, person number 2, understanding that your partner has just been sharing something that's very important to them. Demonstrate your willingness to support them in creating a new experience, one that is anchored in love and wholeness. And you're going to do that in the form of a practical prayer for them. The good news is the only word that you have to use is love. Love, 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 love. Speak it from your heart. Mean the truth. You can translate it in your mind if you want to, or you just leave it as love, 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 love. Any questions that need to be answered before we begin? Person number 2, love on your partner for a minute. And so person number 2, you can bring your prayers of love to a close. Did you feel how the energy shifted? Between the energy of the first person sharing and the energy of the second person sharing. Okay, we get to try it again. Person number 2, you're now going to do the blah blahs, all right? And you know it's a safe space now, so you can really pull out all the stops. Okay? If you got some stuff that's going on, uncork it. Ready? Begin. And person number 2, bring your blah blahs to a close. Now your partner, the person who first began talking, is going to do a practical healing prayer for the second person, for their partner. And again, speak from your heart, speak intentionally, but use only the words love, 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 love. Any questions? Begin.
Poor partner, sorry.
Love, 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 love.
I know people, we can turn the track off now. I know people who, when they have a problem in their relationship, they do this exercise. Instead of explaining what it is that's bothering me and why I'm annoyed and all the rest of that stuff, I can just blah blah with my partner. And because, even if my partner is the one who's causing all the problems, they can take themselves out of that position. He's not complaining about me, he's just complaining. He's not upset with me, he's just upset. And I can see the wholeness, the healing, the peace that he's looking for, and be present for that. And then I can do the prayer without any specifics whatsoever, just inviting more love into the situation. Or to sum it up, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So it is.